So there's an odd development in this Nintendo Switch Pro situation. Bloomberg reported that developers are making games for a Nintendo 4K console that doesn't exist. And then Nintendo made a response saying that it's false. We'll get to the response later, but first let's go through this report by Bloomberg. This is by Takashi Mochizuki and Olga Karif. Sorry if I butchered those names. It says many people were surprised to learn that Nintendo Co.'s new video game console is missing a common feature of rival systems, support for high-fidelity 4K graphics. Perhaps most perplexed were the numerous developers who were working on 4K games using a software toolkit provided by Nintendo. Employees at 11 game companies said their teams were in possession of Nintendo's 4K development kit for the Switch. The companies spanned the globe, ranging from large publishers to small studios, and include at least one that has never made a console game before, Zynga Inc., according to the employees, who asked not to be identified because they weren't authorized to discuss their projects publicly. The latest model of the best-selling Nintendo Switch is set to go on sale October 8th. It will support a larger screen than the current versions, use OLED technology for better color and contrast, and at $350, cost more than its predecessors. But a system capable of handling 4K games isn't expected to be released until late next year at the earliest, people familiar with the plan said. That leaves Nintendo at a technical disadvantage to rivals, whose shares have soared this year while Nintendo have lost 20%. I didn't know that. It also risks alienating developers who have spent months tailoring their games to take advantage of upgraded hardware capabilities. I don't think they're really competing with PlayStation or Xbox. I think they're kind of in their own niche. I don't know. Well, I shouldn't say niche, but I think they're kind of in their own, doing their own thing. I think Nintendo Switch, at least, is a lot different than a PlayStation or an Xbox, and especially the games that they make. So I don't know that they're necessarily competing with them. And as far as the new Switch model goes, that's coming out soon. If you're doing mostly handheld, it might be worth it. Not sure, but I mean, if you're doing mostly docked, it's not worth it unless you want the Ethernet port. If there's also attachments for that you can buy, so it's not completely necessary, but I guess if you really want that Ethernet port, then I guess you can get it. But continuing on, Nintendo responded to a list of questions by saying Bloomberg's reporting is inaccurate and declined to specify which parts of the information it was referring to. I guess this is talking about this response. In a tweet after the story's publication, the company refuted it is supplying tools to drive 4K game development and reiterated it has no plans for any new Switch model beside the OLED variant. I guess since they mentioned it, I should go to this response. They said a news report on September 30th, 2021, I guess that's Japanese Standard Time or Japan Standard Time, falsely claims that Nintendo was supplying tools to drive game development for a Nintendo Switch with 4K support. To ensure correct understanding among our investors and customers, we want to clarify that this report is not true. We also want to restate that, as we announced in July, we have no plans for any new model other than Nintendo Switch OLED model, which will launch on October 8th, 2021. So that's their response. It's kind of odd that they'd respond to something like this. I guess they don't want this whole controversy again, or this speculation again. As we'll see going in more into this article, that could have been the plan before, but ship shortages, might have stopped it from happening. But let's continue this article and we'll get to that. After publication, Zynga spokeswoman Sarah Ross disputed what the people familiar with the matter said. To clarify, Zynga does not have a 4K developer kit from Nintendo, she said in a statement. Bloomberg began reporting on details of the product more than a year ago, including to the bigger OLED display, the fall release, and the higher price. It was also supposed to contain a faster chip from Nvidia Corp that would enable 4K graphics when connected to a television. People familiar with the plan said in March. Nvidia declined to comment. And we did hear that. I do remember that. So, like I said, it's a possibility that they were going to do this, but the chip shortages made it too difficult to do at this time. So maybe in the future they might do it, but I doubt it at this point. Probably like at least midway through the Switch's life cycle. So might just not be a thing that they end up doing. Might just wait till their next console. But the 4K capability didn't come to pass. It's unclear exactly what the design changed. The reason, according to a person familiar with Nintendo's hardware planning, was component shortages, a far-reaching problem born out of the COVID pandemic. After unveiling the Switch OLED, Nintendo said it had, quote, no plans for launching any other model at this time. And I do believe that, like I said. By the time Nintendo showed off the new console in July, the company had already handed out the 4K kits to outside developers and asked them to design software to support the higher resolution. A development kit, which is used to test unfinished games, is a standard instrument in the game-making process. The Nintendo Switch kit contains extra memory to accommodate debugging software and additional ports to facilitate a connection to a computer, but otherwise has similar capabilities to the hardware that customers would have at home. The kit for the original Switch, like the consumer products, transmits video to a TV or monitor at 1080p resolution. The new one does 4K. The lack of 4K in next month's product is significant because it puts the Nintendo system at a technical disadvantage. Microsoft Corp and Sony Group Corp have offered 4K capable consoles for several years and released even more powerful hardware in 2020 that continues to see insatiable demand. The Nintendo Switch, which came out in 2017, is still selling well, and early pre-orders for the Switch OLED in the US and Japan suggest it'll be another hit, though Microsoft's Xbox Series X and Sony's PlayStation 5 are only going to grow stronger as more games come out that take advantage of their increased power. Developers declined to speculate on Nintendo's plans for another console, but said they expect to release their 4K Switch games during or after the second half of next year. Last month, Zynga said that Star Wars Hunters, a game for the Switch and smartphones, will likely be delayed until 2022 after initially being planned for release this year. Although Bloomberg identified 11 companies using the 4K kits, the actual number is probably much higher. Going back to this last paragraph for a second, again, I don't think they're competing. The Switch is selling faster than most consoles ever have. I think they're just behind the Wii at this point. So, I might be wrong on the numbers, but I just don't think that they have to worry about Microsoft or Sony. So, I would dispute that they're competing. Nintendo could still decide to not release 4K Switch. The Kyoto, Japan-based company has quietly shelved numerous products over the years for strategic reasons or technical challenges. One noteworthy example is a sleep monitor called Quality of Life that the company unveiled in 2014 and never sold. I didn't know that. For developers that expended considerable resources preparing for a 4K console, the lack of an upgrade would complicate plans and may add the burden of converting their projects to support lesser hardware. So, I do believe this report. Actually, I do believe this report. I do think that they had 4K kits and were planning to release a 4K model earlier in the year. But I also believe that Nintendo is not going to make another 4K version. I think it's just too late for that now. I think it's just too late for that now. They're releasing this. People aren't gonna. I guess they might, but I think they'll sell less than they would want if they just released a 4K model a year or two after releasing this one. People already bought this one because it was what people thought was the Switch Pro. So I don't think that they'd release one. I think they'd just wait for 4K for the next console. But this is a very interesting development I wasn't really expecting. But I guess, what do you think? Do you think they were planning on releasing one? Do you think that this is bullshit? Think that this will be their last, this OLED model will be their last Switch model? Think maybe they will release a 4K model? Thanks for watching. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. Comment, share. I have another channel called Thoughtful Outlaw Sports where I talk about basketball, baseball, football, anything else sports related I'm interested in. So check that out. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.